Omega Institute, we are a not-for-profit education center. We present workshops and trainings across a wide platform of personal development and cultural development. And we are on 250 acres in the town of Clinton. There are 125 buildings on the campus. We had purchased a camp that was built back in the 1950s. And back then, basically, the way they dealt with water was you pull it out of the ground, you put it back into a leach field, and life just goes on. When we took it, our occupancy increased and our length of operation increased. And so we really needed to look at how are we going to deal with water on the campus. And primary to Omega and our values is sustainability. So we were looking at how do we take this infrastructure problem that we had, and convert it into an opportunity, convert it into an educational opportunity. Omega's mission is the foundation of educating and moving the culture and individual forward. We looked at how can we take that we need to deal with our wastewater and connect people that come to the campus to a greater understanding of water, seeing how many of us now understand that water will be the next oil, if it's not already in certain areas of the world. And then there's the greater community responsibility. How do we as a business show up in relationship to our neighbors, and how do we show up in relationship to the resources that are available to the immediate neighbors, but also to the surrounding community as well. So we looked at it started as an infrastructure problem. We looked at it as how do we turn this into an opportunity to educate. But one of the things that really became clear to us is we didn't have any idea of really what our relationship to water was. We had no idea how much water we were using. We had no idea how much water wound up in the old septic fields. We ranged between 25 and 30,000 gallons a day of usage. Wastewater capacity, 52,000 gallons. And that's done through our Omega Center for Sustainable Living. So the first thing that we had to do was we had to understand who are we? Who are we in relationship to the natural resources on this land that we're stepping up to steward? Who are we in the community that we are a committed member of? And so we went down a path that first thing we had to do was install meters on everything. On all of our wells, we now have meters that document every day how much water we pull out of the ground. But once we determined what our usage was, we had to then think about, all right, what is the actual capacity of this land? Now that we know what we're using, are we outside of the capacity of this land, and do we have serious infrastructure issues, or are we within the carrying capacity of this land? So we bring about 20,000 people a year to our campus. If we want to grow the business, first of all, here we are, we're bringing this number of people in. Can we sustain that amount of people coming in, or should we be looking at reducing our population base, or is there capacity for expansion, or is the sweet spot for occupancy on the campus just about where we are? So we started looking at conservation first. Okay, again, this was a facility that was built back in the 1950s, so you're flushing 6 to 8 gallons down the toilets, you're running faucets at full bore, and you're getting a really nice shower. Okay, but so we looked at all those things, and we said, how can we step in and start to reduce at first? And so now on campus, all the toilets are either low flush or 2-button flush or waterless urinals. We looked at the shower heads, the sinks. So conservation was number one. We couldn't do anything without first knowing what our impact is, looking at how we can conserve, and then we started looking at reuse. How do we take a look at what happens here on campus? You look at stormwater management, rainwater reuse, and for us the big one was how to reuse our both gray and black water effluent, so that we could actually be recharging the aquifer and get as close as possible to what we like to call a closed hydrological loop. So in other words, at Omega, we don't have a public water system that comes to our campus. We have a series of wells. And so we pull the water out of the ground, We send it up to our cistern on the top of the property. We start down at the lake at about 300 feet. The top of the property is at about 540 feet. We're on the side of a hill. So we pressurize the water by sending it up. So you have, at that point, when you have that water usage, whether it's toilets, sinks, anything in the system we're using, dishwashers, it all now goes down to our eco machine in the Omega Center for Sustainable Living. We decided, number one, we're an educational organization. So what is the role that we can play as an organization in the Mid-Hudson Valley? What's our place? What's our role? And because we have 20,000 people come through, and because we're an educational organization, it was obvious that what we had to do was to take everything that we had learned about the campus and looking at it from a stewardship perspective and make that an educational opportunity for every single person that comes on this campus. And not only the people that come for our programs, but open up the campus as an educational resource for everyone else in the valley. People have no idea where their water comes from. And the first thing we try to do is to get people to ask the question of, where's my water come from? What's in it? And what happens to it after I use it? So we created the Omega Center for Sustainable Living. It's now been open for about 3 years, and it really is where we bring everything that we do on campus together so that a person can come and actually see it and be able to stand in it and next to it. And the greatest example of that is we do tours on Wednesday and Saturday on campus, and we'll have participants come down, and we first take them outside the building and we explain what the building is all about, because it's the only LEED Platinum Living Building Challenge certified building in the United States. So the way that this building, as a living building, basically generates 100% of its energy quotient on site. So we purify our wastewater with zero energy, zero carbon footprint, and zero chemicals. The zero chemicals because we do it with constructed wetlands. Inside we have what are called aerated lagoons, where we have a lot of microorganisms along with the organisms that are in the constructed wetlands, digesting and converting the wastewater into clean water, and then we're able to recharge the aquifer. So this is the area inside the eco machine, which basically, when the water comes down, when you flush a toilet, it first goes to settlement tanks. We inject those settlement tanks with microorganisms to help break down the solids, and from there, the effluent, the gray and the black water, travels to a series of tanks that further start the conversion, dealing with nitrogen, phosphorus, etc., in a very low oxygen environment, anaerobic tanks. From there, it goes to those constructed wetlands. From there, it comes into these aerated lagoons, a highly oxygenated environment. And you can see how this area in here allows for people to walk around that. And that's where we do a lot of the lectures and so forth about the building and about water on campus, by bringing people in and actually having them stand next to the water being purified at that particular step in the process. And a lot of these plants, they're growing so rapidly because it's just like being in constant fertilizer. All the organisms clinging to them there, creating their own little habitat. They also act themselves to pull out heavy metals and nutrients. We just completed a study with the Carey Institute on removing pharmaceuticals from wastewater. So we tested the wastewater coming into the reclamation plant and really targeted certain compounds, acetaminophen, a couple of antibiotics, etc., and then tested them on the outfall side in recharging the aquifer. And we were able to totally lift all of the pharmaceuticals out of the waste stream with the plants and microorganisms. Now, what we're trying to figure out now is, where are they? Depending on who you talk to and how extreme the article might be, we're all on antidepressants and hormones. And that's why the plants look so happy in there, too, by the way.